So Gareth has over 30 years of radiological protection experience. I'm sure most of you, or a lot of you, will know Gareth. He started out his career as an RPA at what was originally NRPB before becoming a regulator in 2000. Firstly, he worked for HSE as a radiation specialist inspector, and then he joined ONR in 2014. He's been and still is heavily involved in international working groups and committees, including as the lead UK negotiator for the Euratom BSS revision and the IAEA BSS. He's also involved with the heads of European Radiation Competent Authorities, known as HERCA, and the IAEA Radiation Safety Standards Committee, known as RASC. He's now the professional lead within ONR for radiation protection and criticality, and he leads a team of over 400, probably more than that now, Gareth, but specialist inspectors, ensuring their professional development and future RP and criticality capability within ONR. I'll introduce Laura as well, because you'll be joining Gareth soon. So Laura joined as the Nuclear Graduate Scheme in 2014 as an ONR-sponsored graduate, after graduating with a degree in physics from the University of Glasgow. While on the scheme, Laura completed secondments at ONR Torness Sellafield and then returned to ONR in 2016. Laura has since undertaken roles in radiological protection and emergency preparedness and response, and has recently become a nuclear safety inspector. Congratulations, following completion of ONR's initial training and development programme for developing inspectors. So like many STEM-related occupational disciplines over the last decade, the UK has seen a significant drop in the number of radiation protection professionals. Gareth and Laura are going to talk about the initiatives that ONR have put in place over recent years, share what they've learned through the practical implementation of those, and also what they've achieved so far, hopefully by sharing their experience in recruiting new and developing future RP professionals. It'll provoke some ideas that might help the rest of us. So thanks, Gareth and Laura.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody. This presentation is much like it says on the tin. So it's ONR's experience of what we're trying to do in terms of developing future RP professionals. Obviously, we'll be talking about how it relates to others. It follows on very well from the conversations in the AGM yesterday, for those that were there, of yes, STEM professionals coming into all our industries have been going down over the last decade. It seems to be continuing. It's very worrying, and particularly if the government's talking about new build in the nuclear side of things as well. Lots of new things coming in medicine and everything. We need the people. So how do we do it? So it's trying to address that in this presentation, because whatever it is in the industry, as regulators, we feel the same pain, because obviously we're all looking in the same pool of people, and we need experienced people as well. So there's three key messages to get out of this. Firstly, that ONR has put in place a number of systems I'm going to describe, and Laura, as my co-presenter today, is our living evidence that it works. I'll explain that. In fact, Laura won the prize at the SRP for the best presentation in 2019, which took her to Japan as well. So it does really work. Really proud of it. The second message is this is ONR's approach. This is how we've been trying to do it, and you may get ideas from it for your own organizations. But equally well, I realize lots of other organizations have similar things, and in the discussion or any questions or afterwards, if there's any ideas you've got that we can share with each other or share with ONR and try and improve ours, I'd be really grateful to receive them. So that's the purpose of this presentation. Just try and share with you and try and get some thoughts of different ways of doing things to get people into our industry. So I'm just going to talk about the context of what I'm talking in terms of ONR, the different routes of entry into ONR, and what becomes we call our equivalence process. We have an initial professional development program, the specialism training that we have, and then I'm going to talk about future generations and some of the STEM work as well. I'm finding it easier to look at that screen because I can't see that screen very well. It's too far away. So I'm going to stand near the microphone, so hopefully you can still hear me. So in addition to recruiting inspectors normally, which is what ONR traditionally did up to about 10 years ago, we'd look for someone with probably at least 10 years experience in the nuclear industry, and we'd appoint them and then train them to become a regulator, as well as their RP, criticality, shielding, whatever experience that they had. That was becoming a problem, as you all found. So in 2011, we established what we call the equivalence process. In 2013, we established our nuclear associate scheme. We then became a sponsor of the industry's, the NDA's nuclear graduates program. And then really recently, we've introduced a degree apprentice scheme. So all of these are trying to get people in earlier in their career and get them into RP. So as experienced members retire, obviously, we've got new staff learning, but that means that our experience goes down for a while, always the case. And so we need to develop them and how we're doing it. And that's the bit Laura's going to talk about in this presentation. But it also introduces much more diversity, which is great. We have much younger people doing it. We have much wider spread of people. We don't have to look at just the typical demographic we have in our industry. We can actually try and bring in other parts from it as well. But it does mean we become quite a learning organization. So ONR, I think it was about 6-7 years ago, set up our academy, which is trying to take people right from the beginning, right through their whole career in terms of their learning and development as inspectors. So this diagram I'm going to build up trying to describe those processes or those systems we've put in place. So traditionally, as I say, it's direct entry into what we call a Band 3 inspector. And that's typically someone who's a member of SRP or possibly a fellow of SRP, experienced, probably of the order of an RPA certification, CRAD-P, that sort of level experience already. And then if they get promoted, that goes up to different promotion levels after that. But we needed to look back. That wasn't a supply line that was supplying what we needed. So I say we brought in this equivalence process. So we can bring people in not at Band 3 inspector, but as an equivalent inspector. So that might be someone who's not got the full range of RP experience that we wanted, or maybe it's someone that has, but not in the nuclear industry. So it could be either, and we need to bring them on in those other areas, fill those gaps, if you like, in their experience, and then bring them up to a Band 3 inspector. Okay, so it was going back to widen our pool of where we could look at. We then went back further because, again, there's still the same issue, and it doesn't actually bring new people into the industry. That's people that are already in it. So to get new people into it, we introduced the Band 4 associate role. So these are more of the types of graduates or people who have a small experience in the industry or experience in different parts of it that we could say, actually, we can make this person into a really good inspector. So we introduced the Band 4, and then you've got between them these steps, we call it the equivalence process, assessment point, both of those that you would actually have to go through with a full portfolio of evidence, etc., to move between one and the other, to make sure that it's consistent. And this is across all of ONR. This is not just RP, by the way. We brought this in across all our disciplines. And then, as we mentioned, we've got the sponsored graduate scheme, which I'll mention in a moment, on the left, and then also, very recently, the degree apprentice scheme. So this apprentice scheme, starting off with that one, we've got 3 apprentices in so far. We only started late 2020. So they are employed by ONR. Employed for 5 years to do this apprenticeship. So they spend 4 days a week in ONR and a day a week going to the Blackpool and Flower College, where they're doing a nuclear engineering degree. So after 5 years, they'll come out with that, but also a lot of experience in ONR. In the ONR, we actually circulate them around all our specialisms. We've got about 15 specialisms. So whether they're doing chemical or external hazards or electrical, they spend 2 to 3 months in each of those during that 5-year period. And then at the end, they're hopefully going for something like chartership or whatever. There's the long-term aim. And assuming that they're suitable for us and they like us, they'll get an employment at the end of that. So that's bringing people in right from sixth form. So we've got 3 sixth formers at the moment that are in ONR going through that process. That's obviously just finished sixth form, finished their A-levels. The next scheme up I said was the graduate scheme. I think we've been doing it for about 9 years. It's been running a few years before that with the NDA. Set it together with a number of organizations that some of you are in, where you recruit graduates. Typically, I understand that there's sort of 1,000, 2,000, or even 3,000 people apply for these graduate scheme roles. ONR take on 1 or 2 a year. Other organizations take on others. So there's a question there that follows on from yesterday. And I'm looking at Jim here, who's smiling. You know, we're talking about going into schools and getting people interested in science and becoming our future professionals. There's 2,000 to 3,000 people every year applying for this job. They've already graduated. They're already interested. Where are they? Go to a school, you might speak to 30 kids, 100 kids, maybe one of them joins. We've got a lot interested already. I don't know where they've gone. So that's an area I think we look at. And other industries, I know Sellafield, I know you have a similar type scheme. EDF have a similar type scheme. There's more than just that number as well, because you must get lots of applicants for those too. Well, our advantage is we get what I'd call the cream of the crop. We get to choose from a lot of people what's going to be our future graduates. So they go through a graduate scheme that will go in a little bit more detail in a moment. And they're obviously working towards chartership. My idea is that almost all our RP inspectors are of the level of being chartered then or very soon after becoming a Band 3 inspector. That's the minimum we're expecting. And they do various secondments into industry, different 6-month secondments. They do different secondments in ONR as all a part of that development program. And they also do these things called footprints activity, where they're doing different projects, STEM projects, some STEM ambassadors. There's an international footprints idea as well. So it's just to give them a much wider experience. I think you actually even have to set up your own company as a group and run a business and make a profit out of it, a real profit that is, and things like that. So it's quite a wide program, and we've made some good use of it, some fantastic use of it, to be honest. So the graduate scheme, so we've done it across all disciplines in ONR. We've had 4 through RP, over 3 different graduate intakes, and they have had another person as well that we didn't sponsor, but at the end of the program, when they pulled out the program, we managed to grab them as well. So we've actually got 4 graduates come through, and they take up places in all of our disciplines. So they may be allocated into our RP part of it, or I'll put them into the EP&R part of it that Gary was talking about, or they might become criticality inspectors, etc. So we can then start focusing of where they go. So at the moment, 2 are going through the equivalence processes, have gone through the equivalence process and become Band 3 inspectors, completed, as I say, Laura's one of them, and she'll be talking to you in a minute. The next step up, as I said, was people with some industry, some experience, or people that have come through the graduate scheme that I've talked about, and they go on to our equivalents. So someone with maybe gaps in their knowledge on RP or gaps in their knowledge on the nuclear industry. So there's a framework we've got for it there of trying to get from a Band 3 equivalent inspector to Band 3, different assessment stages for each. And they progress through that by trying to demonstrate against the criteria that we've got. So there's a whole range of criteria, and we say, have they met sufficient across all of that to be a Band 3 inspector? So it's quite a big role, quite big evidence putting together this portfolio. And then it's assessed by a panel in ONR to decide have they actually met that bar. And then only then, obviously, parallel to that, we're looking at chartered status. We have been looking at more recently, could we go back and look at the IRADP? Don't think the TechRADP will apply to us in ONR, but the IRADP possibly should be. So we're looking at trying to build that into earlier on in the system as well. The other role I mentioned was the associate role. So often people coming in from the graduate scheme, when we first take them on in ONR, we bring them in as an associate, what we call a Band 4 associate, someone with, again, less experience, and we want to bring them up through that system to become equivalent. And then once they are, that's the second stage, the equivalence process I've been describing. We also use equivalents for direct entry into ONR as well. So say people with those knowledge gaps, we can bring them in and train them, and normally within 2-3 years, we can get them up to being a Band 3 inspector. So it's all trying to bring different, from all these different backgrounds, people into our industry. So I'm going to hand over to Laura and let Laura describe the process for how we have our initial professional development program. And because Laura's just recently completed it all.
Thanks, Gareth. So Gareth has discussed the variety of different roles that we have in ONR, and also the different development pathways once you're in ONR. So I'm just going to touch on some of the arrangements that we have in place to sort of support the learning and development of all these people. And I'll talk about some of the ONR sort of wide initiatives, as well as more specifically within our specialism. So the first of these is the Initial Professional Development Programme, IPDP. And this is a programme that was set up, it was about halfway, whilst I was on the equivalence process, it was set up in the middle of that. And it's been set up to promote the learning and development of developing inspectors in ONR. So that's whether they're apprentices, graduates, or on the equivalence process. So it does this by facilitating opportunities for development. So one of these is a practical skills training course at Blackpool College. So this covers very practical engineering skills, and it's not just meant for engineers, it's any discipline. The idea is it gives you that sort of broader awareness of what other disciplines are looking at, and you know, what you might see when you go and plant. It also facilitates secondments, whether those are internal or external to ONR. Through this programme, developing inspectors are also assigned mentors. That's to support both technical and regulatory development. So when I joined ONR, I was assigned a mentor from the radiological protection specialism. So that was specifically to support development as an RP professional and to work towards chartership with SRP. But later on, I was also assigned an additional mentor to focus on the regulatory side of things. And that was somebody who sat outside of my discipline. So that can be really useful because it provides a different sort of perspective and maybe someone who can identify, you know, different opportunities outside your normal area of work. A big thing for me was that it brought all of the developing inspectors together. So, you know, we're all across different parts of ONR. And it provided a forum to sort of discuss any issues we were having, to share experiences, and that can be really helpful to help sort of identify opportunities you might not have thought of. So that's an ONR-wide programme. In terms of the radiological protection and criticality specialism, these are just some of the sort of arrangements and tools that we have in place to support development. The first one that I'll talk about is the RP&C competency framework. So that's just a snapshot of it on the screen there. So for each of our sort of subspecialism areas, so that's radiological protection, EP&R, criticality, shielding, and radiological consequences, we have a defined set of competencies. So the blue snapshot that you can see there is a few of the RP competencies. So the bottom one, just as an example, is applies understanding of atmospheric dispersion modelling. The framework then goes on to expand as to what that means in practice for ONR. And then the final column is activities that you might want to undertake to support development of that competency. So what we do is periodically, everyone in our specialism scores themselves against each of the competencies, and it's across all the areas, so not just your subspecialism. And we do that on a rating of 0 to 4. So 0 is, you know absolutely nothing about that sort of competence, up to, you know, being an expert in that area. And we have some guidance to support the scoring. The scores are then moderated as well. And once we have that moderated set of scores, it gives a sort of snapshot across the specialism of the level of competence in each of the areas. And that's really useful because it can help to identify your areas of strength, but also weakness. And that can then sort of inform what training and development you need, and it can also help to inform recruitment as well. So some of the next points are just some of the training and development that we undertake. I'll pick up on a couple of those later. So for example, the SRP webinars were a huge help to us during the pandemic, you know, to support continuous learning and development. And, you know, it's great that those are continuing going forwards. I've mentioned secondments briefly, and the bottom point there, the inspection prioritisation tool, is quite a new thing that we've implemented. So we have all these people that obviously want different inspection opportunities to help them develop. So we've tried to come up with a more systematic way of identifying the sort of training and development needs of individuals. So it's a fairly simple spreadsheet, but basically individuals can identify what types of inspection experience they need, what sort of priority that is. And then it means when somebody's planning an inspection, they can have a look at this, see, you know, who needs that opportunity, and then they can take that person along to support their development. That's a fairly new tool that we've just implemented, so we're just sort of seeing how that works in practice just now. A couple of examples of training and development that we do in specialism. So twice a year we hold a RP&C training day. We usually base that around a theme. So we've had one on RP inspection, for example. So during that, it was an opportunity to share learning on inspection practice. So how do we go about planning and undertaking our inspections? But it's also an opportunity to share findings from inspections and relevant good practice. And we continue to do these virtually during the pandemic. It is quite a long time to sit looking at a screen. So we try to break it up with sort of 5-minute what I did in lockdown presentations. So it was just people talking about, their garden makeovers and sort of hobbies that they picked up. And I think it is quite important because it breaks up the technical presentations, but also from a sort of team building perspective, you lose out on the sort of chats at coffee breaks that you normally have. So it's important to sort of try and sort of supplement that with something. Lunch and learns are carried out every few weeks. So we do these virtually, just about 30 minutes over lunchtime. And we cover a variety of topics. So it's not just RP, it could be other specialisms. Sometimes it's non-technical. So during International Stress Awareness Week, we had a discussion around that topic. And we also use them for what we call knowledge management transfer sessions. So if, for example, somebody's retiring from ONR, they might have a couple of sessions where they just share their experiences with the wider specialism. We do have more formal knowledge management capture processes. That's just a more sort of informal way of doing that. So there's I've discussed some of the different tools that we have. So there's lots of different things going on in ONR. So we're in the process of developing this guidance, which is bringing all of these aspects together. So for example, it's taking the competencies for equivalence and the RP&C competencies that I described earlier and mapping these onto one another. It then identifies some work activities that people could undertake to support these different competencies from an RP&C perspective, and also identifies relevant training courses as well. An idea is that it'll help people when they're coming to sort of write development plans or their portfolios, it'll inform those. But what we have stressed is that it's not a checklist of requirements, so it's not just a guidance that you sort of work through and tick everything off. It's just there to help people sort of navigate the processes a bit better and like I say, to inform their development plans. And this is a diagram that's been taken from the draft guidance. So you can see it's got that sort of progression route that Gareth talked through earlier. And what it does is it signposts where you might sort of want to undertake different activities, whether that's sort of specific training or a secondment. It links the competencies into the sort of relevant point on that progression route. I think an important thing to highlight is that it applies to everyone, so it's right through to band 1. And obviously people come in with different training and development needs. They'll have varying levels of experience. So it's not just a case of working through everything there, but it gives them an idea of what they could be considering. And finally, just to sort of recognise the bigger picture, we've been focusing on training and development in ONR and radiological protection, but we do recognise the importance of outreach activities, to encourage people into STEM subjects in the first place. So we support that through a number of routes. Nuclear graduates volunteer STEM ambassadors, so we had to complete a set number of STEM hours. ONR inspectors go out into local schools and support school science clubs. ONR supports work experience opportunities as well. This picture here is myself and one of my colleagues, Eamon, with a couple of other SRP members at Liverpool University. So there we were talking to students about careers in RP. So it's really important, that we provide living examples and we go out there and are sort of enthusiastic about how STEM subjects have led us to really rewarding careers in an interesting field. And with that, I'll just pass on to Gareth to finish up.
Thank you, Laura. Interesting follow on in that slide, Eamon in the middle there. He's just finished the Nuclear Technology Education Consortium course, which gives him a master's degree. At Manchester, which is a consortium of lots of universities, the NTech, as it's called. And as a result of that, he's now been invited to be on their advisory board that can help try. He uses his experiences of just done it, of how we can get more people doing those sorts of degrees and master's degrees. If we go back even further, though, I think it's from the SRP website at the moment. There was the SRP event in Culham on fusion recently. And I sort of thought, well, my niece is doing A-level physics. What's the chances she could come along to me and take part in our event? She's never been to a conference like we have, never experienced it, obviously. So she thought, okay, right, yeah, okay, a bit nervous about it all. Spoke to Charlene and UKAEA, and they were very happy with it and came along, and she had a wonderful day. And in the car on the way home, it's a 2-hour drive back to where I live in Cardiff, you couldn't stop her chatting about it. Oh, about this, and I loved it when we saw this and everything. I said, oh, write an article for SRP. They might put it on the website. So she's really pleased with that. And UKAEA said, well, can we use that as well? Can we use her pictures? So my brother, dad's very happy with that. And so she's really enthused about it now, of that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, well, we have lots of conferences that we could take people to at that sort of sixth form type age group. Whether it's a relative, it's nice and easy because obviously I was responsible for it. There's other child protection things you have to think about for others. But there must be ways we can do it in groups, or of your local school. Maybe there's your sixth form, you'll get to know the physics teacher and say, oh, maybe we've got this conference, particularly if it's got something you can go and see when you're there. You're not going to want to sit all day in a conference listening to presentations necessarily. But maybe we can make a lot more use of that between all of us. If you're going to something like this, say, well, is there someone I could take with me? Yeah, maybe we could have 20 or 30 at every one of these conferences, as an example. So it was a good example, and I say I couldn't stop her enthusiasm on the car. She's normally quite quiet, she's very studious, and she was eating my ear off. Okay. So just to summarize what we talked about, I've just given some different examples of where we are. I'll put the diagram up bigger in the moment just to finish on. But we've talked about our apprentices, our graduates, our associates, our equivalent scheme, all the new schemes that have been brought in the last decade to try and get people into and developing in the industry. We've used it quite a lot in the RP specialism, so not just ONR, and certainly helped develop our capacity, and it's also helped our diversity. Okay. So we've got this structured approach that Laura's described in our IPDP scheme. That actually continues. It doesn't stop once they've suddenly become a Band 3 inspector, like Laura just has. That obviously continues. We need to develop our inspectors constantly. And you'll have seen on that diagram, and somebody I know just put in a question, you join a regulator, especially if you're joining from a graduate scheme. What's your experience in the industry? Very good challenge. And we know that's going to be an issue. We know that people move around, people leave us and go to the industry, people from the industry come to us. So in the end, we know that some of that will happen, but we need it early on in their career. So the secondments part of it that was on Laura's diagram, that is really important in the first few years, but it doesn't stop there either. Yeah, if I need to go on a secondment, I'll come to one of you guys and say, I really don't know about this area. Can I come and work with you for 3 months or 6 months or something? So we're using that throughout people's career. It's not ideal. Obviously, we want someone, that's what we originally had, someone with 10 years experience in the industry. That's not possible, but that doesn't get people into the industry either. So that's our way of trying to get around anyway, the idea of that they don't actually have first-hand on experience of doing things, which is vital, and I totally agree with that. And we try and get them as many, well, they will have as many secondments as we can. So I'll just put up that diagram to finish, just to put it all in one picture of what Laura and I have described. Thank you very much.
So we're running a little bit behind, Gareth, but I'm just going to ask you one question that's come in through the app, and obviously we'll have a bit of time just at the end before break. But there's a question about, why do you think the number of RP professionals is dwindling? And do you think it's purely retirement, or are there other reasons?
So why is the number of RP professionals dwindling? Obviously, I speak to lots of different organisations in the UK, and I've also do quite a lot on the European scale. It's the same right across Europe. Yeah, it's not unique to us. Most of them, particularly I'm looking from the ONR side of things, the nuclear side of things, that's an industry that hasn't been growing in terms of new build or anything for many years. It is a little bit now. And the government's announcement recently, I don't know how many reactors a week are they building? I don't know, something ridiculous. But that is prospects then of what the industry will have to go on the nuclear side of things. I think all STEM subjects have been decreasing. So the pool that we're all looking at has gone down. And as people retire, there's just not that people coming back into it. So it's a whole range of those reasons. Science and STEM subjects are not so popular at the moment. Everybody wants to be a media influencer or whatever. My daughter does anyway. And also the industry wasn't, and the nuclear side anyway, wasn't growing in that way that would trying to get people in. That's all changing, and we have to get ahead of that. So I applaud SRP's efforts and the discussions, for example, at the AGM last night.
Thanks, Gareth and Laura. So next I'd like to